Great day to each and every one of you. This is what we would consider to be part two as it relates to our conversation of our journey, I believe, here to Fayetteville, North Carolina. We started off last week kind of talking about, I believe, the season in my life that I believed I was in, or where God was taking me to. But then God threw me a curveball and really lined me up with what I believe was really my new season in life. And so let me just pick up, if I can, with the conversation that I had with Bishop Monroe. Of course, I received the phone call from Bishop Monroe about coming to the Simon Temple Church. I certainly was not prepared for that phone call at all. It was not my expectation whatsoever that I would receive that call or even to relocate. But after having a very serious conversation with Bishop Monroe, because certainly it's serious whenever God is in our midst and we're conversating about churches and accepting assignments or appointments in the life of the church. And so after the offer came, I took some time to really contemplate, to really pray and to think about it. And of course, to have some conversation with my wife as well, who was in the midst of a new season, a transition in her life. And so there was transition all over the place. So there had to be some intense prayer, some intense biblical study and reading. And check this out. There was really no conversation with anybody outside of the circle of just myself and my wife. Never picked up the phone and called people and said, listen, Bishop called and offered me the Simon Temple Church. What do you think? Didn't call family members, pick up the phone and say, hey, guess what happened? I can't believe it. Bishop called. None of that happened because I believe in moments like this that you really have to still away from other conversations or potential conversations that may lead you in other directions, or may even lead you to move even expeditiously into the assignment that you've been called upon by the bishop to take. And so didn't want any influence by anybody outside. I just wanted to spend time with God myself. And I did that. And of course, my wife. And so after, again, much time in prayer and, contemplation, meditation, and sharing some time, of course, with my wife, I believe that God said to me very clearly, it's your season and it's your time to move. Let me also say this, because I think it's so important. There was also another struggle, and the other struggle was that I had developed loving and caring relationships with the St. Paul family in the Trenton Ewing area. When you're a pastor of a congregation for 21 years, you can't help but develop relationships. As I shared before, my kids were born in New Jersey. They were baptized there at the St. Paul Church. We celebrated birthdays with church members. They celebrated our birthdays, our anniversaries. We celebrated retirement celebrations with members. I mean, there was just so much going on, and relationships that were developed down through the years. And so I think there was also a struggle for me, because one of the things I must admit that happens to me, I grow attached to people and places easily. And I'm the kind of person that when I grow attached to you and to places, it becomes hard for me to disconnect myself or to remove myself. And so the challenge of knowing that I was going to be transitioning really was heavy on my heart after building relationships with so many people in the Trenton Ewing area, not just the local church congregation, the community at large, relationships that we had with people even outside of the church, getting adjusted to over the years, to the district and the conference, and just the area in general, knowing where everything is, where to go, the restaurants to go to. I mean, there was a lot involved, I believe, in this transition. It's just not where you get a call and you just jump up and say, oh, wow, this is a wonderful and a marvelous opportunity. Let's do this. It was never that easy for me. That's why I believe prayer and meditation, spending that time with God, was so important, I know, to me, and so important to my wife. So we accepted the appointment, called Bishop back, and certainly thanked Bishop Kenneth Monroe for the opportunity to serve in this portion of the vineyard. And then we started to move forward in the transition. So now I'm working on how am I going to share this with a congregation. I believe sometimes it thinks the pastor is going to be there forever. But I think one of the things that I believe, I hope I did well, is I oftentimes talk to the congregation about transitions, that I shared with them over the years that I was not going to be their pastor forever. Although I love them and love the ministry there and the work there, you just don't know what God is going to do. And it may not necessarily be that God is going to transfer me to another conference, to another church. It could be we stay somewhere and we retire. Death could come our way. We're not going to pastor the same church forever. And so that's something that I would oftentimes share with the membership. We would have that dialogue and that conversation. But in that, to know that when transition comes, that God will send someone who will help take the ministry to the next level. That's what it's really all about. Taking ministry to the next level. It's not personal at all. Church doesn't belong to me, doesn't belong to bishop or anybody else. It belongs to God. And so we're in the business of doing all we can to build ministry so that the kingdom can expand, so that people will be blessed, but that most of all, that God's name gets the glory and the praise. Here it is. So I'm trying to figure this whole thing out. How are we going to tell the folk? Because now remember, I'm not sharing this with anybody. I haven't said anything to anybody, because I believe that the first person who should share this information is the bishop. Our Episcopal leader should share that information. And so we had to wait several weeks for that information to go forward. And so here I am pastoring the local congregation, continuing to love folk, continuing to grow and develop these relationships around me. But at the same time, I know that I'm going to be leaving, but they have no idea that I'm going to be leaving. The only person that knows, or persons that know, that I'm going to be transitioning is myself and my wife. That's another hard thing. It's hard to look people, and I get emotional sometimes with that, because again, I tell you, I can get attached to people and places very quickly. So here I am sharing with the preacher steward, the trustee board chairman, the steward board, the deaconess board, the stewardesses, Christian education. I'm having all of the regular meetings because, hey, check this out. Just because we're leaving and we know that we're leaving doesn't mean that ministry halts. It doesn't stop. And so we continue to do ministry, but it becomes even more challenging looking people in the face and everybody's smiling, we're laughing, having a good time. And I'm the only one in the room that knows what's getting ready to take place, and no one else knows. So we had to keep that between just myself, my wife, and of course, the bishop. And then when the Central North Carolina Conference met in November, this past November, that was the day that everyone was going to find out. But it was also the day, which is kind of interesting, that I was having a members meeting. And I'll tell you how God works. I didn't plan that members meeting to tell the members that I was going to be relocating to a new assignment, to a new appointment, that God was calling us to move to a new assignment. That wasn't what the meeting was for. It was really a meeting for something else that had been planned before the bishop and I had conversation about relocation. And so I had no idea about the date of the Central North Carolina Conference. And then we had this meeting date over here that all just kind of came at the same time on a Saturday morning at the same time. And so here I am in the meeting, and the bishop is reading the appointments. And I have my cell phone here in the meeting, and I'm watching Bishop because I didn't want to share with the congregation until Bishop made the announcement. And so eventually Bishop got to Simon Temple. He called my name. And in that moment is when I sat the phone down, sat it aside, and took that moment to draw the congregation in and to share with them that we had some news that we wanted to share with them, that God was calling us to relocate, to continue ministry in Fayetteville, North Carolina, the Simon Temple AME Zion Church. And it was interesting because as I was sharing it, I could see that people kind of looked at me as to say, he playing. Because as you all know, and many people know, I am a part-time comedian, and I just enjoy making people laugh and all of that. And I do that all the time. And so St. Paul was accustomed to that. So when I shared with them that I was leaving, they were like, really? Like, anyway, all right, let's keep the meeting going. And then, now I'm starting to kind of get a little emotional because, now I know that I'm going to have to, to really help them to understand that this is no joking matter. It's serious. Pastor's getting ready to transition. And so after, having some more conversation in the meeting, and they could look at me and tell, okay, Pastor not playing. I could look at some of the faces and tell that they were moving to this what they thought was a moment of deaf comedy jam to a, oh my goodness, he's really leaving. And so again, I got just a little emotional. I can see that there were emotions that were flying, and but I did share with them. We've talked about transition for quite some time. Not that I was going somewhere, but I always wanted the church to be prepared, and I wanted them to be ready for transition, because we never know what God is going to do. Trust me, I'm a witness to that. We never know how God is going to move. Sometimes we think we know. Sometimes we may even say, yeah, this is God working over here, to discover that God is really working over here. And God will give us one of them aha moments where we look and say, oh man, I had no idea that God was doing this. And so, and so to kind of wrap it up, we had that conversation. We finished the meeting with prayer, and certainly prayed, knowing that God would be with the St. Paul family during this transition, and that I was going to be with them to help them through the transition, because I believe I had a month before my first Sunday here at Simon Temple. And so I did everything in my power to help with the transition. I always say this, especially with this particular situation, love the people. And that's one of the things that I did, always did that, and will continue to do that in this new assignment. Those of you that know me, and others who get an opportunity to know me, I'm gonna get attached to you real quick. I'm gonna be like that grandbaby sometimes you see on TikTok that they open up the front door, the baby goes running out, and the grandmother's there with her arms open, and the baby just goes right around grandma and goes straight to granddad and just wraps his arms around granddad, and grandma kind of looks back like, really? I'm going to be like that baby that runs out and just wraps my arms around you and love you. But that's it, love, right? And so I demonstrate love to the St. Paul family over the years. I mean, we were family, so love. But I also had to lift them in this moment. I had to help them to understand that new leadership was coming. And we know that Jesus is the best thing that's ever happened, but Keith Tillett ain't the best thing that's ever happened. And that God will give you new leadership, and oftentimes even leadership that will take you to even higher heights. So I would continue to not just love, but to lift them up. But the final piece, which was so hard to do, was to let go. Love them, you lift them up in this season of transition, but you have to know how to let go. And how do I let go? I let go by simply putting my head down, moving forward into the new assignment that God has called me to, because God has given me a new community of people to love and to lift up. And I shared this with you all before. I'll share it with you today. I am a servant. I am here to serve you, the wonderful people of Simon Temple, by God's grace. I think that may be all I think I need to share, in this moment. We transitioned, we moved, getting used to the area. I've spent just a little bit of time in Fayetteville prior to, because I have an aunt and uncle that live here, and I was a student at Livingstone and at Hood. We would come here for the holidays, and so it was, coming back to an area that I was a little bit familiar with, but not totally familiar with. And so, we moved, made this transition. We were going back and forth for a while. Of course, anybody knows that gets old. You get tired of planes. You get tired of airports. You just want to be settled. And so eventually the Embassy Suites was no longer my place of residence. We moved from there and finally purchased a home in the area. And so we're here. Without getting into a whole lot of details about that, I can just tell you we're here by God's grace, and we're grateful for being here. And when we come together, I think on next week, maybe we'll talk a little bit about what I believe God is going to do, or how God is going to use us in ministry here in the Fayetteville area in the present and in the future. Hey, that's it for me. I know I said a whole lot. I hope you stayed and listened to the whole moment of Tillett Talks. I usually don't go that long, but I thought that there were some things that you really needed to hear. And I really hope that this blessed you, and I really hope you pulled something from this that will help you get through the rest of this week. God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.